Hello, hello, welcome, happy Friday. Welcome to another episode of MOMFIT with Joe Peters, where we help you to win the marathon of motherhood without burnout. Also, welcome to the Spanglish World Network and the Hair Network on Single TV channels 250 and 251. Please remember to download the Single TV app in the respective app stores, iOS and Android. While you are downloading, make sure to rate us and leave a comment. The app is free. And also, Singa TV is available in Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire TV, Roku, and Roku Stick in all the smart TVs. So you are allowed to find us on any of those channels to stay in this community of Mumford, where our mission is helping you to thrive in motherhood and win the marathon of motherhood. And if you are not following me yet, please make sure to go to my socials at Joe Unicorn Coach, Instagram, Facebook. I handle my own social media, and if you have a challenge, a question, a problem, or just a topic that you would like us to go deeper, please send me a DM. And if I don't have the answer, I will find an amazing guest like Paulette that will come to the show to help us today. And with that being said, I'm super excited because you know how passionate I am about all things related to birth and postpartum. And today we are going to be talking a little bit about that part of the process in between pregnancy and postpartum and how birth can be something challenging that can impact not only our motherhood journey, but also our health. So, Paulette is a writer, an economist, and a podcaster that focus on women's health generally and autoimmunity and pregnancy specifically. She had published a variety of places, including creative nonfiction and long reads, and have a nonfiction manuscript called Inside Job that examines different aspects of her experience with pregnancy and autoimmunity, as well as the story of science of autoimmunity. Her podcast, Why You Didn't Expect Fertility, Pregnancy, and Birth, focus on the gap between what we expect in this giant transition and what we actually experience. She had a BA from Yale and a PhD in economics from the University of Chicago. Paulette, thank you so much for being here. Let's gonna start with I asked all my guests to give me a phrase that they love. And your phrase was one that I hear a lot in Alabama when we were talking backstage about it. And your phrase is "It is what it is." Let's gonna start with that. Why that is the phrase that you choose for this episode?
Hi, Joe. Thanks so much for having me on. I'm very excited to be on the show. The phrase, it is what it is, will become clearer once you hear my story. But basically, we experienced some serious medical issues that we had no control over. And so at some point, it is what it is reflects that we kind of had to accept that and adapt to it and do what we could to manage that challenge. Instead of suggesting it didn't exist or there was some other way around it, it is what it is. We're going to have to deal with what we've been given.
Awesome. And now that's a great segue to your story and why from um, economics you move into helping women to deal with birth and challenging birth and pregnancy and postpartum and do this amazing work of normalizing that the expectation and the reality. I will get brave enough to say the majority of the times don't match. So why you don't tell us that why and that story, that origin story of how you find that passion and that love for what you do?
Sure, absolutely. It is not an obvious career path. That's clear. I was pregnant my last year of grad school in economics graduate school, and I should add that I came to that pregnancy kind of not Easily. I think I imagined it again, talking about this gap between what we expected and what we experienced. I assumed if I had unprotected sex, I'd be pregnant. That's like a next day result. And that did not happen for us, like it doesn't for lots of people. And we ended up in the fertility gauntlet where they have to check all your machinery, which is not, I'm grateful that it exists, but not always effective. So in our case, they couldn't figure out what it was. Miraculously, we used an IUI, an intrauterine insemination, and got pregnant with that. And then we were sort of off to the races. I sort of thought, oh, I'm done. There, now I'm pregnant. It's all done. And that is the voice of someone who has no experience in that world and had no idea what they were about to step into. And the pregnancy was going along swimmingly, very well. And 25 weeks in, we hit a bump. And what I will say for people who are listening, who are pregnant now or not yet pregnant, what the story I'm about to share with you, what happened to me, will not happen to anyone else. It is exceedingly rare. It's like 1 in 30,000. It's not likely to happen. In any case, I get pregnant. We get halfway through, and they find my gynecologist finds the heart rate's a little funky. It looks a little low. Nobody likes to hear that. She says, "Go home, drink water. You're probably dehydrated. Come back in 2 days." So I, being a dutiful student, go home and drink like 87 gallons of water and lay flat the whole time, and then come back and assume the problem is fixed. And it turns out the problem is not fixed. The heart rate has gotten lower. So then, yes, it is very stressful. And, I've never been pregnant before. I don't really know what this means. And she sends me to a specialist, also not a great sign, a fetal cardiologist, which I have to say, I did not realize that specialty existed before my experience. And the fetal cardiologist finds that the heart rate is continuing to slip. And in my case, what has happened, what they eventually figure out, is that I have an autoimmune problem, and my autoimmune problem is attacking the fetus. So a very unusual set of circumstances. Usually the autoimmune problem that I have does not occur until your 40s, and I got it when I was 25. And I just like many people with autoimmunity, you just don't know because symptoms come up one at a time and they recede, and then you bring each symptom to kind of the right medical department and they say, oh, they look at it narrowly, and so it's very hard to find autoimmunity. In any case, for the last 12 weeks of the pregnancy, the fetus's heart rate, which was supposed to be 120, 150, was 50. And I had probably 3 appointments a week, 2 with the fetal cardiologist and 1 with the OBs to check on the baby. And this is very much the heart of it is what it is. It's a super rare problem. They cannot fix it in utero. They're not entirely sure what to do with it. And I'm, 25 weeks pregnant. So you're just going to have to manage that. So my husband and I both I worked all the time. That was kind of the way I managed it, was to try to turn my focus to something else. I was very committed to the idea that the baby was not going to was going to survive on my watch, was the sort of thing I said to myself. And I did as much research as I could on a topic that's super rare. We got very, very lucky, and she survived for the 12 weeks. And then we get to the birth, and they're going to do a C-section because her heart rate is not responsive to the environment, because my antibodies, now everybody after COVID knows what antibodies are, attacked a nerve in her heart. So her heart was just beating kind of willy-nilly. It was not beating in response to its environment. And so they're about to do a C-section, and the surgeon is saying to me, I don't think this baby's going to make it. Birth is a really stressful experience for a baby. Blood flow has to reverse in the body. All these things have to happen. And I don't know if a baby who's had this really low heart rate and a damaged heart will be able to survive this. And at this point now, I'm like, just let's do the C-section. Let's have it happen. Let's get it over with. So they do the C-section. She's born alive. Her heart rate is really low. She is failing the APGAR. But now she's out of my body. So there are things that the medical community can do. So they take her to the NICU, the neonatal intensive care unit. They are working on her. The very next day, she gets open heart surgery to implant a pacemaker. And, that those are really rough times. My college roommates, who are my best friends in the world, flew out and took care of my husband and I. You can as you can imagine, we did not get anything to get ready for the baby because we weren't sure if we would have a baby for the last 12 weeks and through the birth. So they swooped in and did sort of everything for us and got us all ready. The baby was in the hospital for 9 days, and then they released her. That's it. It's over. And she is 22 and just graduated college. So totally worked out. But that experience in graduate school, being in this context where there's so many things that doctors who I thought were heroic throughout, right? Everybody wanted to help us. This was a really hard case, but they didn't catch I didn't have the autoimmunity issue caught before I was pregnant, which I had been going to the doctor. So it wasn't like I was one of these people who never ever went to the doctor. And there's so much unknown about pregnancy and birth. None of the things I experienced were things I expected. And that's what sort of drove me into this researching these topics and being interested in this material.
I am so excited that they had a happy ending. But
Yeah.
as a mom, and I was telling you, but in the backstage, I had a postpartum anxiety. I cannot even fathom the stress and all the feelings of the unknown and not being able to do something for your child. And I think that is so important what you are saying. And I think that your work is so groundbreaking because, like you were saying, we are being into brainwashing to that movie story of, oh, you get pregnant and that's it, and then you have a perfect pregnancy, and then you have a perfect birth, and then you go home and you have a perfect fourth trimester, and you just love it. And it's not like that, and it's so challenging because when we are not expecting that, then we don't have the resources, we are not prepared, we don't even know options that we have, we don't even know that there are that who can help us. And I see it in the three areas. I see it in the pregnancy, like it was for you. I see it a lot. I just saw it last week with a mom that prepared her entire pregnancy for a natural birth and wanted to be it, and actually was a very traumatic birth that ended in a C-section. That are things that go out of the place. Or what happened to me, that my pregnancy was great, my birth was great, and then the fourth trimester just fall apart, and then there was no end. And with that, I think that is very important, um get that normalization of what is in our control as moms, especially in that pregnancy and that birth and that challenging birth. What is in our control, and then what is not out of what is not in our control, and how we can manage that. Because this is one of those topics that create polarity. So
Yep.
I either micromanage and everything is here and I'm attached to the result, or I don't care. So then I just need to figure out how to do it. And I think that this is one of those places that we need to be very clear into what are the things that are on my control that I can do to advocate, to support, to prepare. And then what are the things that I need to be aware that I didn't did anything wrong. And still, what I was expecting is not what happened.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I do think another phrase that would be popular around our house today and was popular during the pregnancy was one day at a time. So, exactly to what your point, I couldn't control anything. I couldn't control the outcome. I couldn't control what my body was doing. I couldn't control the fetus. But every day I thought, I just have to get to the end of the day with a live baby. That's the only goal. That's what I'm going to do today, and just focus on that. And that is, I think that comes up forever in parenting, right? If your kid is having a terrible day, if they had a terrible night, if you in postpartum didn't sleep or are super anxious, it's one moment at a time, one day at a time. That's all I'm responsible for right now.
And when we are talking about with your experience and you are working with your clients and with your woman, specifically about birth, because it happened a lot with pregnancy and postpartum, like we were saying. and there are more time. So I think, and I may be wrong, I want to hear your opinion, but the level of trauma is different because it's diluted into more time. So you still have trauma. I still have trauma from my postpartum and birth specifically because it's so intense. And you also have the intensity of the pain of what is happening. I think that get into a very different footprint of what happened. So on that one with challenging birth, how woman can be prepared to be empowering to advocating to this is the birth that I want, and still be prepared of it is what it is if things go down. Where is that line between keep advocating for myself and also let go and don't get completely crushed because I am having a C-section or because the pain was more than what I was expecting and I am asking for the epidural or because something happened in my body wrong and I had to be rushed to surgery. So I lost the first 48 hours of my baby when all the one was that golden hour. So let's gonna talk a little bit about that and what we can do.
So that's a really good and important question. I think one thing that we forget as moms, and it's easy to forget because the baby is literally inside your body for 9 months. So you think of it as part of you, but a birth is something between two different people, right? It's you and the baby. So you don't entirely have control over your own body, as anyone who goes through birth experiences. You have no control over the baby. That is a separate person. And anybody who's had issues breastfeeding knows that. These are two totally separate things. So I think, yeah. So I think to go into a birth, you need to keep in mind I'm only one of the two critical participants here, and I don't entirely control this. And just be open to what happens. I think the what's so important from all my discussions with so many women who talk about this trauma that you're referring to is they think things have been done to them and not for them. And I think the important thing to do in that circumstance is to really work on communication. And if you think, I mean, if you had a vaginal delivery, I can imagine that's much more intense. With a C-section, they make you numb immediately. I mean, that they made me numb, and I remember the anesthesiologist gave me the epidural or what spinal or whatever they did, and I immediately grabbed his shirt and I was like, "What have you done to me? I can't feel my legs." And he looked at me like, "Okay, crazy," and like slowly pried my hand off his shirt and was like, "This is exactly what we want." So I didn't have the physical intensity of a delivery, but it is not in your control. Everyone is looking for the same outcome. Uh, you just have to be open-minded about what's going on. In our circumstance, I don't think a doula would have made that much of a difference because we had this very unique experience where everyone is waiting to take a kind of injured baby from me to the other hospital to get worked on. So there were many people involved in my birth that were not directly looking out for me, but for the baby. And there were all these other issues going on. I think a doula can be super useful because that can be the person who can be the communicator between you and the medical team. And a doula has seen a bunch of births. And for most of us, we haven't seen that many, right? I've only seen two, the two I was at. So I think something like that makes a huge difference in how you feel about the birth in the end. And I've interviewed so many women who wanted a natural birth or a home birth or something much more holistic and ended up with something much more medical. And whether they view that as traumatic or not depends on how that transition was managed. And so if you bring someone with you who could help you manage that transition, if you're in the throes of a vaginal delivery and they say, the shoulder is stuck, we can't get the shoulder out, we're going to have to do a C-section. If someone comes to talk you through that, it's hard to imagine you're going to say, holistic birth above all else. Like that is why we're here. So these things make sense. People aren't making these choices for reasons other than the safety of the mom and the baby. I know a lot of people say, oh, doctors are doing C-sections because they make more money. And that does not seem to be the case at all. And so I think if everyone is working on the same team, you'll come to a better outcome, no matter what it looks like.
You give me goosebumps because actually I didn't thought about it during birth, but because I was preparing for a natural birth, one of the things that happened was my doctor was like, so this part of the story. I get to the hospital, and then the doctor was like, "You are," that my wife was like, "You are fully dilated. You can push." And I
Wow.
was like, uh, "I don't want to push. Can I wait?" And then my doula was like, "Okay, let's gonna talk about it." And then I wait because I was unconsciously, I love that connection. And for all the moms that are hearing us, please take this from Paulette. It's a two people job. I always say, if I'm not feeling the urge to push, that means that he is not ready and I'm not going to rush him. So he can stay there. I'm fine. I'm going to wait. And I remember when I pulled him up, the first thing that I said was, "Thank you so much for working with me. You did such a great job. You are so strong. Thank you, baby." And I love that because then it's such an empowering thing for us as moms of saying, instead of saying it's all in my shoulders, is I'm working with my baby together. And
Yep.
like you are working with anybody, there are challenges that happen, and it's about that problem solving that happen. And it's about, I love what you said, being in the same team. It's not us against you, and then the medical, everybody want the best, like you were saying, for baby and mom. One of the things that for me is being very empowering is the use of the acronym brain. And then that is why I'm a big advocate of having a doula for those what if, because the only way that you're not going to have a what if is if you have a scheduled C-section for a reason, whatever that reason is. But if you are not
Yeah.
having a scheduled C-section, the what ifs are infinitive.
Yep.
And then that brain is okay. What are the benefits of this thing? What are the risks of this? What are the alternatives? What is my intuition saying? What will happen if we don't do it? Actually, I was talking with a mom that want to have a vaginal birth, but it was not progressing, and the doctors were like, "We need a C-section." But because she was doing all of this, she went through that, and she was like, "Okay, I understand the benefits. I understand the risk for the baby. I'm not going to risk my baby. What is the maximum amount until it's absolutely necessary to do the C-section?" And the doctor then think about it and say, "You have 1 more hour." And she was like, "Okay, I'm gonna keep trying for this hour. And then if in 60 minutes this baby is not out, then I'm happy going to C-section because I know that." And I think that is empowering that you were saying, that is the change of they was doing to me, and I was an spectator in this process, versus I was an empowering team member from the decision, from the perspective. One that for me was a little challenging and I had to do some work was, I want an water birth. But this is different in every state. In Ohio, you can do labor in water, but you cannot birth in water. You need to get out of the water before you start pushing. But being the stubborn person that I am, I had all my plan. I was like, I'm gonna start labor, and then I'm gonna tell them that I cannot get out because I'm gonna have my baby in water. And that was the plan, and that is what I was going to do. And guess what? When I get to the hospital, I was fully dilated. So by the time that I get to the room that I was jumping in the pool, they were like, "You are not allowed to even get in because you are already ready to push. So you are not going." And I was like, "Oh." So I give birth in a place and in a way that I was not expecting. Like it didn't, but it's part of that part. So I love how you are showing it into, it's not done to you and you have that control. Now let's gonna talk a little bit about how much that can impact your health, and how much I want to hear your opinion, because we sometimes, I think, that underestimate and undervalue how big and complicated of a process pregnancy and birth are. And because we underestimate them, we actually make unrealistic expectations about what it is, when it's actually such a holy moly magical out of the craziness thing to do, like that 9 months and then the birth?
So I love this question, and I'm a total birth and pregnancy nerd. I cannot get enough of this science, and to be honest, like we need it. So let me give you two examples before I talk about my health. Let me give you two examples of doctors that I've interviewed for my show about issues in pregnancy that we don't understand. So one doctor's name is Carl Weiss, and he does research on trying to find biomarkers, things in your blood that will tell you information about preterm birth. And what he is looking at right now is he's got a biomarker that can predict preterm birth at 12 weeks. So, what that means is you didn't have the preterm birth because you carried the laundry up the stairs. You didn't have the preterm birth because you had a margarita last night accidentally. It's not the sushi. It's not the cheese. It's not the running. This, if we can find it at 12 weeks, then that means there's uh, something fundamental about the way the baby has implanted or the way the placenta has already formed or something like that. So you are not controlling that. That is not, if only it were so easy that we had the rule that if you lift laundry, you'll have a preterm birth. So none of us would lift laundry. It's much more complicated than that. And the second story I'm going to tell you is about another doctor, Dr. Kute in Tennessee, does research on miscarriage. And what he is looking at, he and his team are looking at people who have repeated miscarriage. So often I had a miscarriage before my first pregnancy, and people who have miscarriages take on that burden and responsibility and say, it's something I did. Again, I didn't realize I was pregnancy. I had a drink, et cetera, et cetera. What his team has found is that one of the theories for why there are repeated miscarriages is that there's some kind of sensor in your uterine lining that detects whether an embryo is viable or not. So they think for people with repeated miscarriages that something is off with that detector. So really the issue is that you get pregnant too easily. You get pregnant with every embryo that comes out, where for people who have this detector working more appropriately, it is not implanting an embryo that won't work out. So again, it's nothing that you are doing. You cannot control this sensor, which they have not fully identified in your uterine lining. There's nothing you can do about that. And that's like good news and bad news. The good news is you're not responsible for this issue. The bad news, excuse me, is that you can't control it. It's not. It's not something that you can control. So these are just two tiny little points about pregnancy that we have learned in the recent past. There's so much we still don't know. I mean, it's incredible.
But before you go to the second part, I want to say I don't think that they are tiny. I think that the over 3 million women that are seeing this is absolutely game changer, because the amount of guilt
Yep.
that we as moms put in ourselves because my baby was premature, because I was not able, my body was not able to keep my baby, because all that, or miscarriage,
Yep.
could just poof off if we had access to this information
Yep.
that we should all have, because that is part of what we are doing in pregnancy, of saying it's a biological thing and nothing that I do will affect it. Oh my God, that will heal so much of that guilt and shame. Moms, thank you so much for sharing those two stories. And let's gonna go into the complexity and the impact on health.
Yeah. So it is amazing, and we're learning more every day. And I think I pregnancy does. There are all kinds of immune changes in your body that have to happen for you to have a pregnancy. If you think about it, your immune system is geared to attack things that are foreign, and the baby is partially foreign, right? It's half your husband's or partner's DNA, and so all these immune adjustments have to happen. So after the pregnancy, autoimmune conditions divide into two groups. One group that's made better by pregnancy because your immune system is sort of tamped down a little bit during pregnancy, and some that are made worse. And postpartum is, again, so many things are changing, right? Your hormones are totally shifting. What's going on with your thyroid? Nobody knows. All kinds of things are changing. And even though people say postpartum is 6 weeks, because that's how long it takes for your uterus to shrink down to its normal size, every organ in your body has adjusted for a pregnancy. And it takes much longer for many of those things to go back to what they were before the pregnancy, and some of them never will. So there are all those adjustments. I did have a rough road out of pregnancy, out of both of my pregnancies. My autoimmune problem completely flared. I didn't fully understand it at the time. I mean, I think all of us who have newborns know that you're buried under newborn work. And so things that may be going on with you and your body are kind of pushed to the side. And I didn't breastfeed at all because antibodies were the issue in both of my pregnancies. And so sharing the antibodies was the mistake my body made. So I didn't breastfeed at all. But I have come now to understand more about autoimmunity. And what I can say is that for me, something like functional medicine, where they completely changed my diet, has had dramatic positive effects on all of my autoimmune issues. And I would have said, just to give you my brief trajectory, in graduate school, I ate like like a 7-year-old. I had like lollipops and Mountain Dew every day because I didn't want to cook. When I got pregnant, I was much more disciplined, no more Diet Coke, no more Mountain Dew, and real actual food. And I sort of thought I ate healthily, but I did not eat healthily. And so, under the guidance of a functional medicine doctor, who the other benefit is the diet is individualized. So it's made specifically for what your body can take. So, for example, my body doesn't love oatmeal. I have a huge blood sugar spikes with oatmeal. Who would have thought? I would have thought eat oatmeal all day and you'll be totally healthy. So things like that, changing your diet, a focus on that, something that's individualized can make a huge difference in how you feel and your energy levels and all those sorts of things.
And I love how holistic you are bringing this concept, because one of the things that I feel is a shame is how we are making a battle about who is right. So if I go into Western medicine, then that is the only right. And then if I want to go into holistic medicine, then I don't want anything with the Western doctors. And I am a huge advocate of thinking about your support team. And I am actually a fan of impact. Like I will tell you, for me, in my pregnancy and my birth, I had a midwife. Part of my team was that I found a place that was inside a hospital because I have a blood disease that until the day that I was giving to birth, we didn't knew if I was going to bleed out or not. So it was important for me having a lactation consultant, having an integral medicine, alternative medicine. All of that is not exclusive, and I love how you are making the message of you can have the best of each of those worlds, and then it's almost a right that you have, because as more you have the best of each of those worlds, the best your transition is going to be, the less traumatic your process is going to be, the less regrets you are going to have and you are going to do. Because one of the things that I've been seeing is we are getting so focused into narrow things that there is not one person that can support us in the vast black hole that pregnancy, birth, and postpartum are. And then that means that we need to have the person that is completely specialized in food and making sure that it's telling you, oh, have chicken. Like I was smiling when you say oatmeal, because oatmeal was one of the things that I eat every day for my milk production because I have problems producing milk. And then having the person that help you with the postpartum feelings. And I was laughing when you say about the 6 weeks, because that in the US is just nuts. But even now, my baby is 3 years old. I fell in love with a doctor from Australia that is calling about postpartum depletion, and he's making research saying that it take up to 24 months for your physical, mental, and emotional body to get back as close, because you're right, it will never go completely back to before pregnancy. My baby is going to be 3 in July, and I'm still handling some of those things because I'm still breastfeeding. So I'm still, if you ask me, I'm saying I'm still in postpartum because I'm still having some of that. And that is the part that we don't give grace to ourselves and to other moms. Sometimes I want to talk a little bit about that with you, into going back to the expectation. We think that is hocus pocus, the baby, we push the baby out, the baby is nursing, and then that's it. Now I need to move. And we don't allow ourselves that time to actually know that it takes time to get back and then get normalized and get feel back to us. Like, I still don't feel completely like myself. And it's been 3 years. So how we support each other in that journey of normalizing the huge understatement that is bringing a new life to this world.
I love this issue, and I'm gonna use brain again with you. Um, so the first thing I have to say is I recently wrote this article about being an empty nester, and I called it "The End of Postpartum." That's the end of postpartum, when the child is no longer in your house. So I'm with you. It takes a long time. And there is a newly developing science called matrescence, and it is talking about becoming a mother and that process and all the brain changes and all the things that happen to both you and your partner that happen with caring for another person. And matrescence is supposed to be an analog of adolescence. And so no one thinks you hit puberty and the next day you're an adolescent, you're a teenager, it's all figured out. It takes years. And the same is true for motherhood. It takes years. You are growing your ability to connect with another person. You're learning a baby's language. Your body is recovering from all the things that have changed. And in the science of matrescence, they have also found that they can measure certain markers in a partner's blood. So there are brain changes happening to your partner, even though they have not physically given birth to a child. All this stuff takes years and years. So the 6 weeks thing is kind of nonsense. And with respect to the medical stuff, I would say no one has all the answers. No one does. So you have to look around. For people who have struggled with autoimmune issues like I have, I literally saw every Western doctor, every Ayurvedic specialist, Chinese medicine, shamans, Reiki, everything, because no one has all the answers. And for many of them, I would say, similar to your brain acronym, like what's the cost? What's the benefit? What are the alternatives? What could I do? What would non action look like? And this is how I found this functional medicine person who has completely changed my life with her work.
And I love the mattresses, and I think that that was, we are going to go a little bit into the feminist part of me, but I cannot resist it. I think that that part was ripping away from us, because I think that we as female go through three main stages in our life: our adolescence, matrescence, and menopause.
Yeah,
And I was laughing because you were absolutely right. Neither with adolescence or menopause. It's like, oh, you get menopause on one day and that's it. Oh, check, you are in menopause, go and figure out. Menopause take years.
yeah,
Premenopause, menopause, postmenopause. Adolescents the same. And ripping that middle one of mattresses, of giving us that sacred time for us to transition, I think that is giving such a disservice to society. And I believe that that is why we have so much depression and so much other problems in society, because it's a critical time that we are not being allowed to experience. And we are being expected to literally, after one day, okay, now I'm a mom. And after 6 weeks, everything needs to be perfect. And then if it's not, then what is wrong with me? Then
yep,
if it's not, then I'm doing something wrong. And it's not that it's nothing wrong, is that it's only been 3 months.
yeah,
You are not supposed to be all good. Like a teenager at 12 years old is not going to start being okay until like he's probably 18, 19, if we are
yes,
lucky.
yep,
I actually am gonna completely give you credit, and it's still the time that postpartum ends is when they go to college. I completely love it. But I love also one thing that you said that is very powerful, and is don't settle for less in your motherhood journey. I admire and recognize what you just said and say, hey, if this person don't have the answer, that doesn't mean that there is not an answer. It just
yep,
means that that person don't have the answer for you. So as moms, in your pregnancy, in your birth, in your postpartum, keep reaching out. If the answer here is not good one, try the next one, and try the next one, and try the next one, and ask. I promise you there is going to be one that will give you the the answer that is going to balance your life. Um, Paulette, going back into part of what you said at the beginning that was absolutely spot on with the communication, how women can keep that in front of their mind, because I think that we are all guilty, that we, probably because our ancestors were like that, we all think that we have mind reading powers, and we think that people should know what we need and want. How a woman can start exercising that muscle of communication and articulating what we knew, what we want, and then start seeing the entire support team, the entire care team, as that, as a team, and create strong communication bonds with everybody in that team, so then that become a shield to have the most empowering experience, even if it's not what we were expecting, the most empowering experience that we can have in each of those areas of that journey of mattresses.
Yeah, that's a great question. And for each person, it may be different and it may depend to some degree on how good a communicator you are and how direct you are. For me, one thing that was super useful was I would write down on either paper when I was giving birth 20 years ago or on a phone all the issues that I had and all the questions. Because sometimes when you get in the room with your doctor, you're distracted by what's going on or who's around or what the nurse has said or what you saw in the waiting room. So it's important to go in prepared. So I would say when you are calm, when you are thinking about it, and everyone that has a cell phone at different points in the day, you may add to that list. You may, oh, I forgot, I want to ask about this. And I would just bring that list with you to your care team and make sure that everybody understands it. And you may have your doctor or midwife or whoever you're dealing with repeat it back to you. So what they heard is what you think you said. So there has to be some kind of matching element there.
I love that. And I think that that is applicable to pregnancy, birth, and also postpartum.
Yeah.
Into when you are with a baby that doesn't sleep, like mine, that those 3 o'clock in the morning is the time that you are like, oh, I wonder about this, but you know that everybody else is sleeping. So put it there so next day you can have that communication, that conversation. Because I think that one of the themes on this conversation that is coming back and back and back in a very subtle way is you don't have to do it alone. You have people around you that can help. And the only way that they're going to help is if they know how to help. And that part is the part that we were talking. What is in your control, what's not in your control. What is in your control is being able to communicate and be an advocate for what you want, for what you need, and from your concerns and from your worries, and then from there move into that other part. um Paulette, when we are talking about birth and challenging birth, in your experience with all these women and all these medical teams, how can be a journey of healing those challenging, traumatic, let's gonna call them like they are, like what you live was a traumatic experience for 12 weeks, worrying about your child being alive every day, or a traumatic birth or a traumatic postpartum. After the fact, how we heal that and transform it, like, because we were talking a lot into preparing, how you prepare to not make it traumatic. Now maybe we have people that already passed through it, already have a horrible experience in pregnancy or birth or postpartum, and for them how they can start into that healing journey to adjust that, to not be a sour, pulling down reflection of them and their experience in mattresses.
That's such a good question, and I think fundamentally, The issue is understanding what happened to you. And so people may approach that in a number of different ways. A lot of people that I've talked to, myself included, have used things like therapy to talk to someone else about the things that happened to us and have it reflected back to us in a way that makes sense, and have some objective third party say, oh, that was really hard, or something, have some recognition of what you went through to help you process and understand what happened. And uh, another thing that helps, I think, is finding community, finding other people who have gone through similar experiences. So, this isn't me alone. Pregnancy, birth, and postpartum are all team sports. But for some reason, women take it upon themselves to imagine this is all on me. And this is all, everything that has happened is because of things that I have done. If only we had that level of control, right? It doesn't work like that. And so it is really useful to have people around, first of all, to hear other people's stories and hear that they went through the same or similar scary things that you did. Then it's not you alone, and there's something bigger than you going on out there. So I think to keep track of things like that are helpful to work through the trauma. But know that you are not alone. Whatever happened to you, you are not alone. And there are people who will listen and appreciate, and you can definitely heal from the things that have happened to you.
I absolutely love this because we talk about how you can prepare to face it in a very proactive way no matter what is facing, and then now we are saying, and even if you didn't face it like that and you have a trauma, go to therapy, deal with it. You don't have to live it with your entire life. You can heal it. And I love the concept of the tribe and understanding that you're not the only one, that there are people that almost every single mom that is honest, I bet you $1 million. If a mom is being honest, she's going to tell you that she had some kind of trauma or thing that was not planned, either on pregnancy, on birth, or in postpartum. Paulette, thank you so much for being here. If we could grab all of your wisdom, what would be one last message that you want to share with the audience about this topic? And if they fall in love with you like I did, how they can connect with you, how they can keep learning, please remind them of your podcast again as well.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again for having me on. I think the message I would want to leave you with is that one of the most important elements in the process is communication. Communication, 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 to get experience that you can be proud of and live with easily. I think that's the way to do it. And I share a lot of women's stories about their own birth experiences, the difference between what they expected and what they actually experienced, and interviews with doctors who are bringing us along to understand more about pregnancy on what you didn't expect in fertility, pregnancy, and birth. That's the podcast. So you can find me there, or I have a writer's website. It's just my name, pauletteKamenika.com. You can find some of my writing there. A lot of it is about postpartum and pregnancy and health issues for women.
Okay. So everybody go and find Paulette's podcast, What You Didn't Expect. And we are going to put her entire information in the notes of the podcast so you can find her, connect with her if you align with her. And then in her podcast, she is reminding us that we are not alone, because you're going to find many stories of other women. And then the thing that I love the most about your show too is you are bringing doctors that are giving us information of things that we should all knew to reduce that load of motherhood, because like the show is, motherhood is a marathon, and we need to run that marathon with the right resources and the fuel so we don't burn out. Thank you so much, Paulette, for being here with us. It was a pleasure. And for everybody, go and find Paulette, follow her podcast, and follow also me if you are not yet on Joy Unicorn Coach. This show can also be heard on the Spanglish Radio Network. Please check out www.spanglishworld.ca for all the news and programming. Spanglish World. Watch it, hear it,